Hey, welcome everybody. This is John Paul Mendoza, Dr. Speedstein. This is Raging Verbalist number 219. It's an exciting day. I've anticipated this session for quite some time. And if this is your first time here, welcome. If someone's been here for a while, welcome back. Always hit that like, subscribe, notifications. You want to get annoyed. We're on YouTube and Facebook group, which is Position to Win Book. And you can check us out there. Also, talk about topics that are of interest to me. And as always, the ever lovely Sandra will be asking me the questions that if you were there, you would be asking them. But welcome, Sandra.
Hello, how are you doing?
Doing great. It's an exciting day. We are going to talk about this. It's anticipated. All right. So what are we talking about today?
All right, so we're talking about Ferrari, the movie. So did you like the movie?
Well, I have been watching and waiting for that. Michael Mann produced it and said, we're going to do a movie about Ferrari. Always nervous about that because whenever people do movies about, anybody like that, like Enzo Ferrari, you never know. Is it going to be cheesy? Is it going to be well done? Is it going to be high end? Is it going to be whatever it's going to be? So, yes, I went and saw the movie. I saw it in the theater. So I get that whole immersion experience and really enjoyed the movie. I thought it was well done and well worth it. And of course, the reason why we're doing the call today is that the highly anticipated Blu-ray, DVD, 4K discs are coming out. I know for some of you, you may not know what those little pieces of plastic are, but I always look to those and look to pick up the Blu-ray when it comes out.
All right, and since I don't know anything about the story, why should someone see this movie?
First off, I think it's the biggest reason for seeing the movie, if you are not a Ferrari, fan, watching and understanding all this, is that it's an amazing glimpse into his life and somebody who is so passionate and so interesting as a person, but also, built these incredible cars, and Ferrari continues, of course, to this day. And I think it's that human aspect, which is really good. I don't want to give any spoilers away, but I can say that this is really a slice of Enzo's life that I think most people don't really know or understand, and how many trials and tribulations. Somebody who is as successful as he became over his life just assumed that his life was always at this pinnacle and this top. So I would say the reason why you want to see it is that there is a human element that is rarely seen, and the emotions are very, very intense.
And some of the critics have said that there wasn't enough car racing.
I've seen those, and in fact, I saw the movie before. I didn't read anything about it. I knew it was coming, but I didn't read any synopsis. I didn't read anything. I wanted to just have it wash over me. And then I started reading what some of the critics say. It's not a movie about racing. So if you're into racing, there's lots of movies about racing that you may want to go see and get into the racing part of it. I mean, Ford versus Ferrari has a lot of that drama going back and forth. And, that's a glimpse of Ferrari in a different way. But this was not designed to be a racing movie. There's racing in it, there's cars in it, but it's really at a different level. So I think that some of them were anticipating that this was going to take place, and they went, well, yeah, it's going to be a movie about Ferrari. We're just going to see a lot of cars, and that's what it's all going to be about. So I understand that. Usually those people don't know the story about Ferrari, which is really the depths and the levels that I think make it useful and lessons learned for all of us.
So why does Enzo Ferrari stand out in history?
Here's the guy who was born in Italy, goes through World War I, wants to be a racing car driver, gets excited about racing, is part of Alfa Romeo for a number of years. World War II was devastating to Italy. Obviously they lost the war, but also there was a lot of destruction that happened. And from those ashes, Ferrari builds his own company and builds his own team and starts winning races, starts winning Grand Prix races. And really, he was a racer. He wanted to be a racer, but he needed to sell cars to the public so that way he'd have enough funds to actually do the racing. And that was a big challenge of it. So the reason why we want to learn about Enzo and understand him is that it's really a character study about a person who understands their goal that they want to achieve, their driven motivations that they're pushing towards, and most importantly, that he never traded those values for anything else, that he really was pushing and always pushing to get to this best point that he possibly could get to. And that's rare in this world, because somewhere in life, people hit that compromise point or that coasting point, or they go find a hammock and, you know, probably get a little shawl and all of that. And I don't believe Enzo Ferrari ever did that. And the reason why he stands out in history is that so few people will do that kind of effort. In fact, that since 1950 to today, they've been building cars, and I can tell you that, you know, they've built fewer cars than probably, you know, major manufacturers like Ford or Toyota or, you know, somebody else would build in a month. They've built in the lifetime of this company. But Enzo stood out because of how stalwart he was and how powerful he was as a man himself. Now, that's really important, because when we talk about why businesses fail, why businesses aren't successful, why they don't do very well, part of it is the fact that there's always these compromises that take place. And that's why, if you really want to be successful, what you want to do is you want to go grab this. Most businesses fail in the first 5 minutes. It just takes them 3 to 5 years to realize it, position to win. Enzo Ferrari understood positioning, didn't need a book for it, didn't need to have somebody come out and explain it to him, didn't need me to do it, or, you know, Reeves and Trout of positioning the battle for your mind. But what he really understood is he understood that, got to show it the right way. He understood that you have to have that intensity, and you have to understand what you're trying to do. And that's why it's important. So if you want to pick up the book, you can get it at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, wherever physical books are sold. You can always order it that way. You can go to positiontowinbook.com, positiontowinbook.com. You can get it there. You can ask me to inscribe it, and I will sign it for you. Also, you can get it on Kindle and Nook, and then also Apple iBooks, and wherever gets you excited about that. And then we have a book called Remote Work for a Better World. And that's so, you know, we live in a world that, you know, we sometimes have to live in 2 places at once. So that's how you can do it. Check it out. Also, we have, of course, the ever popular, very most important, is the Raging Verbalist mugs. So every day you can get one, and then you can fill it up with your favorite libation, and then you can have a little rage in your life too. All right, Sandra, what's next?
All right. From a branding standpoint, where does Ferrari rank?
Well, it's interesting, because one of the things that people do, you know, talking about media and everything, is there's a company called Brand Finance Global, and they named Ferrari as the world's strongest brand multiple years in a row. And in fact, this was from 2020, and they have called a Brand Strength Index, or a BSI. I don't know if you ever want to have BS in your acronym, but anyway, and the BSI is that Ferrari ranked 94.1 out of 100 in how their brand ranked globally. I mean, they sell a tiny fraction of the number of cars in the world, but they rank up there, and they top the rankings, where only 12 other brands, only 12 brands are ever awarded the or not ever, but are in that instance were rated AAA plus rating. And they were presented, of course, at the World Economic Forum at Davos. And they received that award. So this is an amazing achievement, and this speaks to the power of having a brand that is really, unless they screw it up, I mean, you know, this thing is going to go out a long distance in the future and keep going. But I can say that it is astonishing that here's this company in Maranello, Italy, that ranks at the top globally. And there are a lot of businesses. There are a lot of great businesses, but Ferrari stands atop the podium.
And what are some of the lessons you can learn from Ferrari's branding and positioning?
the biggest thing that Ferrari does from a positioning standpoint is they know who they are. They know what they're trying to build. They're not trying to build a cheap Ferrari. They're not trying to build a Ferrari for the masses. They're trying to build Ferraris for Ferrari owners. They want to push the limits, deliver amazing performance, deliver a visceral sense to it. So from a positioning standpoint, they know where they fit in the four quadrants when you build a positioning diagram, and they're really on the upper right-hand corner, which is the highest that you can get, whether you're talking about pricing or you're talking about people viewing it from a value standpoint. The other thing is that Enzo Ferrari understood this, and luckily they've maintained this, is that there's a value in having the sharp edge. And that sharp edge is so critical, so important. There's this great story about Peter Sellers, the actor, who was doing a movie in Italy, and he wanted to buy a Ferrari. So he goes to Ferrari. This is in the 1960s, and he tells Ferrari, what color he's going to want and all of these other things. Now, he was obviously, he was British. He was used to, like, small car companies in the UK would custom do whatever you want him to do. And Ferrari basically starts questioning him. Now, by this point in time, he's a global actor. He's a star. He's got all of the makings of that. And Ferrari says, "What do you do?" And he says, "Well, I'm this actor." "Well, have you worked in Italy?" Because Enzo doesn't know much beyond Italy. And he goes, "Well, no, I'm working with Vittorio De Sica on a movie." "Oh, okay." And Sellers talks about it as if he's buying a car. And Ferrari corrects him. Enzo corrects him and says, "You may buy a car, you may possess the car, but that car, from the day it gets built until the day you die and it goes to someone else, or it moves on, it's always a Ferrari." In essence, he understood how sharp that edge was. And in fact, that sharp edge has stopped some people who probably would buy a Ferrari from doing it, because it is a real different way of doing it. Usually car dealers are trying to push it on you. It's virtually impossible to buy a brand new Ferrari if you don't already own a Ferrari, because they never make enough Ferraris.
And what was it like going to Ferrari?
Well, I had an opportunity when I was in Italy, and I was there on a tour, and we were touring all of the exotic car manufacturers and the styling houses and all of that. And I'll just set the stage. I'll do the short version of this story. Is that sitting there with this guy Eddie and his wife Susie, and Eddie had the golden ticket. And to get into Ferrari, he owned a Ferrari, is that you have to go to your dealer and fill out all these forms, because like if you want to go see most car companies or most manufacturing facilities, is they have tours, right? The public can go through. You can go through Hershey's chocolate factory. You can go through, in Golden, Colorado, you go through the Coors brewery. You can do that. But that isn't the case in Ferrari. So he filled out all of his forms, and you have to get a visa from Ferrari. Now, this is a time when, email was around, but they didn't do email. So they send everything over, and they send him back, and he's got a visa. Now, it's harder to get into Ferrari than any country I've ever gone into. And he has this, and I look it over, and I go, wow, this is great. Now, I am shamelessly sucking up to Eddie, because he's got a visa to get into Ferrari, and of course there's a whole nervousness about the entire tour group, is if we will actually be able to get into Ferrari. Lamborghini, no problem. Maserati, no problem. All these other places, no problem. Ferrari, got a little bit of a problem. So my friend Dan and I were there, best friends, and for life, and we're I'm just saying, okay, we got to like attach ourselves to get through that door. So Eddie goes, well, let's go to the restaurant, which is where the racing team eats. And this is in Maranello, Italy, and it's called Montana. It's spelled like Montana. And we go there, and you have to actually have a letter of introduction to go into Montana and to be seated. So we walk up, and of course, here we are, four obvious Americans. And Eddie has a letter from a famous photographer who used to be a photographer with the racing, it was at a magazine, and would travel with the racing team. And we walk in, and he said, we'd like to have lunch. The place is empty with the exception of one table has people at it. Every single table has a little sign on it that says in Italian reserved. And we said, well, there's nobody here. We'll eat a quick bite. By the way, that's kind of not correct. In Italy, there are no quick bites. And we'll do that. And the guy says, as you can see, we're all booked up. And Eddie, of course, pulls out his letter from this photographer written in Italian, and shows it to him. And the guy reads it over, and he nods his head knowingly, and he said, I'm afraid we're all booked up. And he goes, well, didn't you read it? And he goes, yes. He goes, well, but he's a good friend of mine. And the guy smiles and with his accent says, you need to have better friends. So we're rebuffed. And I'm like thinking, crap, we can't get into a restaurant. What are we going to do to get in a Ferrari? So we end up going to the restaurant Calavino, which is a restaurant that Enzo had built for people to go hang out, and eat if they were visiting. And I said to Eddie, for heaven's sakes, let me do the pitch. Now, by this point in time, Eddie has known me well enough. He says, okay, I'll let you do the pitch. So we walk in through the gates of Ferrari, and, they are just like, stopping people left and right. And there's a painted line on the floor that they stop you, and they look over your papers. So I take it and I walk up to it, and it's designated for 2 people. We have 4. So I explained to the guy that Eddie's wife, Susie, was going to be in Paris shopping, which was in fact the case, but she decided to go to Italy anyway. And, and it would be a tragedy if we didn't go. And I went and, did this whole emotional plea about, going in to see Ferrari. And the guy looks it over, and he's sitting there and he's thinking and, talking about, Eddie, and of course, this guy doesn't know Eddie from anybody other than he owns a Ferrari. And it would be a shame if we didn't get in there. And the guy says, okay. And I look at everybody, and they go to say something. I said, walk across the line. And we walk across the line, and it's like one of those things where as we start stepping away, the hallway kind of elongates back behind you as those plebes who weren't going to make it in didn't make it in. So it was great to get into Ferrari. And, it was one of those events in my life I'll never forget. Amazing place to go watch how they're building all these Ferraris and how that was going on. And it was surreal because, again, here I was walking into this place, and Enzo's original office, though obviously they've remodeled the plant, has been preserved perfectly the way he would have had it. And the office looked like a mess. And I thought, well, reminds me of home, reminds me of my office.
All right. And describe why someone would buy a Ferrari versus a Porsche.
So here's my friend Dan, and here's Eddie. And Dan is trying to make a decision. Life is going well for him, and he's making good dough, and he's trying to weigh out, should I buy a Porsche Turbo or should I buy a Ferrari? And it was a Ferrari 360 for those who are interested. And he's weighing it back and forth. Now, Eddie owned both of those cars. And Eddie sits there and says, well, Dan, I've got to just tell you how to make your decision. You got to get your mindset right. And of course, Dan is being very methodical, 0 to 60 and horsepower and all of those kinds of things. And Eddie says, you're missing the whole point. If you go and you buy a Porsche, buying a Porsche is like going to Oktoberfest, and there is a German server, a waitress, and she has, she's kind of corseted up, and she has overflowing big, large breasts, and she walks up, and every time you need a beer, she brings you a beer, and there's this kind of allure and excitement, but she's a little on the bigger, huskier side. And he goes, every time you need a beer, she's there, she delivers a beer. That's a Porsche. Dan's a little taken back by it because he's leaning towards Porsche. He goes, now, here's what you have to understand about a Ferrari. A Ferrari is that you meet an Italian woman in that amazing red dress, and you have this torrid affair, and you have some of the best, wildest sex that you've ever had in your life. And of course, every day is a drama. You never know if it's going to start or it's not going to start. You don't know if she's going to throw something at you or not. So Dan, what is it? Do you want the solid, over the top, keep getting a beer, or do you want to have this amazing torrid love affair with this Italian flame in a hot red dress? Well, Dan bought the Porsche because, of course, he didn't want that much drama in his life. But I thought Eddie described it perfectly, because every person who I met on that tour who owned a Ferrari discussed how when they went out there and their Ferrari ran and things would work, and this other guy would talk about how he would go and sit in his garage, very wealthy guy, sit in his garage and just sit in his Ferrari, not driving it, sitting in his Ferrari, just because he was in that environment. So that's something that maybe you could think about when you want to go out and decide if you want to buy a Ferrari or a Porsche, because don't expect it to run every day. Don't expect it to do what you want it to do. It has its own sense about what is possible.
And is it possible to capture some of that unique magic that Ferrari has for entrepreneurs, business owners, and salespeople?
Well, many of the photographs of Enzo Ferrari show him with dark glasses. I mean, daytime, nighttime, doesn't matter. And one of the things I think of it is that you need to create a mystery. You need to create something that is out there and pushing things beyond the limit. The other thing that you want to do is get your head wrapped around that. Now, Enzo Ferrari probably told more people no and F no and whatever in his life than almost anybody else in the business world. And he had unbelievable sense about what he needed to do and what he could do and what he would get and make that happen. He had that innate belief that if you have that sharp edge, that you're not building something for everybody, you're building something for those few who understood that value. So if you can capture some of that, if you can get some of the mystery and have the courage to be able to say, no, this is what I demand, and this is what I'm going to do, and this is what I stand for. If you do that, I believe that you're going to have the right positioning and go to that next level. Most of us do not have that, because what we do is we compromise and compromise because we say we need the money. And you may say, but well, did Enzo need the money? Yeah, go see the movie and then we'll talk about it. The reality of it is that he had an iron will and an understanding of what he could achieve and what was going to take place. And because of it, he built a brand that endures today and I believe will continue in the future. Highly recommend Ferrari the movie for those who really want to see the multi-layered lessons. And I'll leave it at that. And so for myself, John Paul Mendoza, Dr. Speed Selling, and the ever lovely Sandra, this has been the Raging Verbalist number 219. We'll see you next week. And hopefully you'll take the time and you'll watch and enjoy Ferrari. Don't be distracted. Focus on it and capture the lesson.